Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Adapting to AI-Driven Workforce Changes. Now we've got a very exciting discussion planned for you today. Before we get into that, I've just got three very quick housekeeping things to go over. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded and it's being live streamed. If you can't make it to the end of today's discussion, or if you want to share it with one of your colleagues, you'll be receiving a link to the recording tomorrow morning. So keep an eye out on that in your inbox. Second of all, there will be time for a Q&A session at the end of today's discussion, probably about 5-10 minutes before we finish up. So if you've got any questions for our panelists, you can fire them in the Q&A throughout the chat, and we'll jump into them throughout today's discussion. Panelists, if you feel like answering them live by the keyboard as well, feel free to do so. And last but not least, we will be sharing a post-webinar survey directly after this webinar concludes. Now, we really would value your feedback and input on that, because basically, in collaboration between DevSkiller and our panelists here, who I'll introduce very shortly, we're going to produce a little bit of a white paper resource based on the topic of AI and AI in the workforce, and that'll be shared with you guys probably sometime towards the end of next week. So your input's actually going to be really valuable for that resource that we're going to put together. So yeah, please get involved and get involved in the polls that we've got planned in today's discussion as well. So now that housekeeping stuff's out of the way, I might get started by introducing our panelists. I'm going to go left to right on my screen. So I'll start with you, Dimitris. Can you just give us a few words about yourself, please?
Sure. So Chief Revenue Officer at DevSkiller since May this year. Before I spent some time in the MarTech industry, fintech industry, and the large enterprise business. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Dimitris. Joining in from West Coast in the US. So 4 in the
that's my 4 a.m. Yeah.
Thanks for getting up for us. Okay, Gethin, can you give us a few words about yourself, please, mate?
Not quite as early for me. I'm in the UK, so I'm midday. But so my name is Gethin Aidin. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at an employee experience technology business called Benefex. But I'm also a qualified psychologist. I've written 2 best-selling books and made various different HR and workplace influencer lists over the last few years, including this year being named globally as the most influential HR thinker. I work in various different guises as well, advising the UK government on workplace and employment issues. And a lot of talks I've been doing recently have been about AI and specifically the impact on the individual, the worker. So I'm quite interested and hopefully we'll come to that later today, but glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very interested to tap into your extensive experience. And last but not least, Francesca, can you please give us a bit of an introduction about yourself, please?
Hi, so I'm Francesca. I'm from London. Background is working in startups and technology, and then more recently have been working more on the kind of event side of technology, community building, education, consultancy within generative AI. So I have a company called Gen AIcon, and then I also have one which is specialized in the fashion industry called Fashion AI. And I'm really looking at how generative AI is impacting the creative industries and for brands and for marketeers and creative industries. But I also look deeply at the legal and ethical side of things, regulation, IP issues. And so I have a lot of opinions on that side of things.
Yep. And I'm happy to say we're going to get stuck into all of those topics today. So just to open things up, I'm going to start things with a quick poll, which should be appearing on your screen now. And the question is, how extensively is AI integrated in your current workplace? And we've got a few options on the screen. AI is not integrated at all. AI is in early stages of integration. AI is moderately integrated into some process, is extensively integrated, or is fully integrated as a fundamental part of our operations. I just want to gauge everyone's sort of level of experience with AI before we get started. And then we'll get stuck into our first question. I can still see some votes coming through, and there's more people here than there are votes. So please continue to vote. And I will share the results right now. So we do have, you should see them on your screen. So we've got quite a variety of answers, but the most common was AI is in the early stages of integration, with half of you exactly voting for that. But we also had moderately integrated at 26%, or not integrated at all, interestingly, with 12%, and a couple of votes obviously for the 2 last ones there as well. So I'll stop sharing that. And I am going to jump into our first question for you, Francesca. And obviously, with extensive experience in AI with your companies that you set up, I was wondering what industries or job roles do you believe have seen the most impact or most significant impact or transformation due to AI adoption?
Yeah, so within the creative industries, it's impacting photographers, for example, because you can now create AI photography with Midjourney, copywriters, because you can create text so easily, and you can fine tune LLMs with, say, the tone of voice of your brand or your company. And in general, I think even cybersecurity as well is an issue, as there's been a real rise in AI related risks for companies. But yes, in terms of jobs that are being displaced, I would say it's photographers, copywriters, and then also the knowledge economy, lawyers. It's really, really easy to write contract, consultancy gigs. You have access to the world's information, and before it was all about developing if you're a freelancer, developing your personal brand, your website, your blog, putting information out into the internet. And now, unfortunately, those people who gave away all that information have kind of sold their fate, because now ChatGPT can aggregate that information and feed it back to you in a very succinct and organized way. Even things like UX designers, you can upload an image of a website and it will tell you in detail how you can improve the website. So I've just touched upon some basic jobs that will be kind of displaced, but I think every single one will all have to look at how our jobs are going to be shifting.
For sure. I can certainly attest, being in marketing, to see the impact on the creative side of AI and how that's sort of come into play in recent years with marketing. It's very quickly made a huge impact on all facets of marketing, certainly. And you touched on it there. I want to bring it over to you, Demetrius, if it's okay, because this question might be a little bit too soon in the discussion. It would be nice to sort of start here and we can maybe get through it and come back to it towards the end. But we saw those responses in the poll where we had a bit of a mixed bag of results about where people are and where their organizations are in terms of the level of adoption of AI. But I wonder, what do you think in terms of the timeline until we see completely widespread adoption of AI in the workforce? Muted, sorry, Demetrius.
Sure, I think you had a 50% of respondents indicating that this is in an early stage, and I think that is a proper reflection of what is going on at this moment on the market. But following what Frankie said, it's a widespread approach, right, across all the industries. A lot of the roles will be impacted, and we started to see how this is impacting our day-to-day life at work as well. So as for the pace and the speed, I think we're going to have probably between the 3 to 10 years of shifting process, but it will have a different pace and speed between the different industries, right? So if you take, for example, healthcare, probably within the next 3 years, we're going to have adoption around the 35, 40%, with the following period between the 3 to 7 around 20, and then beyond 7, it's going to be probably the rest of that industry. And some of these aspects in this industry are just obvious, right? You have supporting diagnostics, early identification of the disease, imaging in radiology and pathology. I mean, all these processes can accelerate, right? So I think the healthcare is a very specific industry that will hit a lot of challenges on the legal side, and at the same time sharing the data, very confidential data, might not fit our today's legal system. So probably a proper debate will follow, but that's probably the pace, right? If you look at the automotive, that shift is already happening, right? So here, the 30-40% is very likely to happen within the next 3 years, and probably fully adopted within the next 4 years after that, right? So 7 years period that will probably give us almost full adoption in that industry. Here you have a typical areas, everything that is autonomous fleet and ride sharing, autonomous features that we see in the cars like Tesla and so on. That is becoming more prevalent. Engine monitoring and the predictive maintenance. I mean, all of that is impacting this industry, and we can tell from what we see on the street. Next one is finance. That's a very special industry in terms of the technology. They're very, very savvy in terms of the technology and adopting new tech. So here I predict that it's going to be probably more than 40% within the next 3 years, and again, fully adopted within the 7 years. Keep in mind that the nature of finance is very algorithmic, math-oriented. So for years and decades, that industry was investing heavily in the tech stack. So probably they're on the front end of this whole change, and then the manufacturing. It's another one. Here you're going to have challenges around the supply chain, and I predict that the first 3 years probably won't adopt a lot, but once that's done, the next 4 years after that, so within the 7 years, we're probably going to adopt 85% in that industry. So comparing this one to finance is obviously very different. Manufacturing is a low margin business. Finance is a high margin. So you can see that level of investment and also impacting the pace of adjustment. So that's probably what I see as a pace and changes, pace of the changes in these industries.
Yep. I mean, probably there's a very likely chance that we have a varied background in terms of industries in our audience, and probably explaining the range of adoption for sure. So thank you both very much for those answers. Sure. I'm going to shift the discussion a little bit about towards skills and companies, and we're going to get into this. We've got a few questions planned on this particular area for AI adoption. But to start it off, I'm going to launch another poll, which should be appearing on your screen now. Now, this is a multi-choice poll, so you can leave multiple responses. And the question is, what do you believe are the most crucial skills that professionals need to develop in an AI-driven workplace? We have data analysis and interpretation, programming and development, problem solving and critical thinking, adaptability and continuous learning, ethical AI decision-making, collaboration and teamwork, communication and human AI interaction, or other. And they, by design, a combination of sort of skills on the soft skill side and also hard skills, which we're going to talk about a little bit more once we get these poll results in. And we've had even more people join since the first poll, but I can still see plenty of responses coming through. So I'll let it roll for another 30 seconds or so, just so everyone gets a chance to vote, and we'll share those results, of which will also be finding their way into our white paper following this webinar as well. Okay, couple more. I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. Okay, so with 58% of the responses, we got adaptability and continuous learning, and a very close second was ethical AI decision-making with 52%, but votes, I missed data analysis and interpretation at the top with 58% as well. So a very, very mixed bag of responses here, basically for everything other than other. And communication and human AI interaction actually won with 61%. So we got communication, human AI interaction with 61, adaptability and continuous learning with 58%, and data analysis and interpretation with 58%. So for equal second. And then we had third place programming and development, interestingly enough, with third place. So I'll stop sharing and close that. It should be away from your screen now. And I'll direct this question to you, Gethin. Having looked at the poll results, and in your experience and in your opinion, what do you believe are the key skills individuals need to develop or acquire to thrive in an AI-driven work environment?
Yeah, so I think this is an area that I think is being massively overlooked at the moment. If you look at data from the World Economic Forum, they predict by 2027, which isn't very long, that 83 million global jobs will disappear because of advances in AI. But that same research also found that 70 million new jobs will be created. So if that's true, not only will 14 million roles be displaced and disappear, but there'll be a growing number of new opportunities in this space. And I think just as the internet and mobile phones brought us roles we hadn't even heard of or were able to predict 20 years ago, AI is clearly going to bring some new jobs to us. I think we will have people building virtual environments in places like the metaverse, which is still really unknown at the moment, and kind of how the metaverse is going to pan out. The 3D economy, I think, is going to be something that's going to blow. People will look to move into more virtual spaces, and that isn't necessarily virtual reality, but augmented reality and those kind of third spaces, which is what the metaverse will be. So anyone who's used Fortnite, it's a similar kind of thing. You're in another world type thing. And I think if you think about the roles that exist in your organization now at the moment, like digital marketing, SEO, social media managers, cybersecurity, these are all relatively new roles that have been created by new technology. And so I think we have to consider now what roles will be created within our organizations in the near future. And I think by doing so, for people like me, that really supports this idea that we can make sure people aren't being displaced by AI, but that we're actually reskilling them to do the roles that we know we will need in the future. And there's a really good example of IKEA as a global employer that's starting to do this now at the moment. They're actively figuring out what will they need in the next 5-10 years time, and looking at who they employ now that work in their organization that they can reskill for those roles in the future. So they get people who are already ingrained in their culture, who understand their mission, and they move them into new roles to the benefit of them and the company. And so I think, aside from what we see in the obvious kind of programming and development skills that came out in your poll, I think AI is going to require employees who can do things like understand and develop user interfaces and user experience, UX, who understand machine learning and large natural language processing models like ChatGPT. Just as there's a skills base for being proficient in things like Salesforce or HubSpot, I think there's already going to be, and I think we can start to see this with people's YouTube videos, where people are upskilling themselves on how to ask ChatGPT the right questions in the right way to get the best out of that kind of tool. And I think problem solving is going to become a skill that will be in more demand, as well as things like critical thinking and, as you pulled out, kind of communication skills. Emotional intelligence, there's a lot that AI can't do. There's a lot of the human experience that AI at this point in time can't replicate. And so this displacement means some of those other skills will become much more important to our businesses. And so when we talk about what skills people need for the future, it's also what skills are going to become more important that have nothing to do with the AI. So I think more of those human skills will also become more in demand. Demetrius talked about healthcare. Healthcare, I think, is going to have a really big impact by AI, but it also means that, I have a mother who has Alzheimer's, recent diagnosis. There are robots currently in Japan that could give my mother the medication and answer questions and remind her of things. I'm not entirely sure at this point in time how much I want a robot to be delivering care for my mother in that really sensitive position. So the empathy of a caregiver that could work alongside and augment that AI or that robotic experience, I think that kind of stuff is going to really, so I think we're going to start to see some of those roles in healthcare that can deliver empathy and care become more high value roles, more high value skills. So those soft skills, as they once were known, I think are going to become pretty critical skills as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for the insights, Ed. Demetrius, what about you? Have you got a take on this particular point?
Yeah, sure. I think Gethin has synthesized this pretty well on the different fronts. I would say this: anything that is creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking, job oriented, it's probably going to be something that will thrive in this environment. What exactly? I mean, this is going to vary between the different industries and the nature of the work, but I think it's fair to assume that everyone will be impacted, right? And I think there's no way we're going to avoid it. Like Gethin said, right, we need to just start getting onboarded on learning how to work with these tools, and as they becoming more available in the different domains, I think we need to just learn how to operate in that domain with these specially crafted and designed tools for in these areas, right? But I want to shift some our conversation into probably our early adopters and experiences so far. I want to talk about like how we explore, these new ways of working with this tool, like AI, in this completely brave new world, right? So, starting at the top, I think the perception of the AI phenomena is changing, and the first change that I see is happening with the CEO in the room, where there's a different type of question that is asked to other executives. First one, before it was a question, what is it, what it is, now is a question, what to do about it, and how my organization can start this journey, right? So that's a one quality change in the conversation that probably will drive a lot of changes in these organizations. And at the strategic level, the CEO is bringing and assembling the multifunctional team that is trying to figure out how this is going to impact internally everything, right? Starting from creating a product, how to deliver product, how to manage the relationship with the customer across the board, right? So that's something that is getting me very excited about moving into the age of creators, right? And that's what's going to be at the core of that change. The second thing I want to talk about is the direction we're getting from the adopters in entering the really low barrier of entering in the industries, right? So a lot of these companies, they had a barrier of financial knowledge, anything that was just simply not accessible to them. Now this barrier is going down, and I think there will be a lot of competitiveness that will change the way the companies are structured. So that will come at a lower cost, but not in the sense that suddenly we're going to get rid of the people. I think it's more about reskilling and upskilling them and ensure that the company can operate at the lower cost per unit and a higher ROI. So I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail, because I remember reading a McKinsey research on this when they tested one of the call centers and then the customer sides, and they realized that the team actually was able to accelerate the learning process significantly from, let's say, level 1 to level 4, just because AI was helping them to bridge the gap between the experienced and non-experienced employees in the form of text, talking points, all the materials that they couldn't just develop by themselves without that experience. So that is getting me into the point where I feel like we're providing the learning curve that is more efficient, for these employees. And I like to look at this as a AI that is giving you superpowers, right? And a lot of these routine tasks are getting eliminated. A lot of that is getting accelerated so that you can actually focus on what is the creative, more critical thinking type of job. So yeah, this is my take on the early adopters and what they're giving us as a direction that this whole thing is taking the industries.
Yep. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting points from both of you. Thanks very much. We do have some more stuff about continuous learning and upskilling a little bit later on, so we'll definitely be coming back to this topic a bit later into the discussion. But before we do that, Francesca, I wanted to talk to you about the career path. Now, obviously, the career path isn't exactly a new thing, but certainly AI career paths is something that's becoming more prevalent. And I wanted to get your opinion about a typical career path for professionals in AI roles, or that are currently existing and potentially even that are going to become available in the near future.
Yes, absolutely. So data is key, understanding data, structured data and unstructured data. So what's amazing about large language models is they can deal with so much unstructured data. So if you think of structured database being a database, a CRM, all of these programs that we input information into, and we've got specific fields and our spreadsheets and things like that. Unstructured data is everything from reviews on sites to on social media, and it's being able to bring that in and use that to train these large language models and fine tune them. So I think being able to understand data, structured and unstructured, categorize it, and use that to fine tune these large language models is going to be crucial. Then we have more of this kind of soft skill side of things, which are things like being an AI trainer and change management. Then we've got on the legal side, AI ethicists who understand issues around data processing and GDPR. What Demetrius was talking about in terms of healthcare before, industries that are dealing with highly sensitive data, financial information, healthcare, insurance, they will be looking at using synthetic data. So recreating data and then modeling on that. And then you can go up the career path to data engineers, natural language processing specialists, machine learning engineers, and then eventually you might get to a position of being either a chief information officer, an AI strategy consultant, or AI project manager. So that's the kind of career path on the data side. But there are other careers within this wider landscape. So being good at data from a marketing standpoint, understanding personas, that will be really, really important, especially when we get to a stage where we're automating content, we're personalizing content, not just based on people's demographics, but also their psychographics and their language. And then as Gethin was talking about before in terms of this 3D world, metaverse games, that is going to become our new form of experiences. I think those 3D worlds will replace our 2D websites. And the only way we will move past uncanny valley, where you're having a conversation with an avatar that is sort of dead in the eyes and you're having this really awkward conversation, is when you start to power those avatars with conversational AI. And I see conversational AI as a whole as you've got chatbots on the one side, which are rules-based. You ask a question, you get a specific answer back. And then conversational AI is much more intuitive, it's more friendly, but it hallucinates. It's a great bullshitter. You really need to make sure that it's trained on the right information. So you need to bring those two things together. It's like the left side of our brain and the right side of our brain. But that's going to be incredible when we get to that point in time where we're actually dealing with avatars instead of salespeople. So you can look at companies like InWorld. They do it specifically for AI non-player characters in games. But we're going to move past games for gamification to fashion in games, sports and, live 3D sports. That's going to be incredible. And I think we'll start with a kind of Gen Z focused industries first, and then later on down the line, it will be, insurance, fintech, healthcare. So it'll be more the sort of entertainment, media style industries that will change first, I think.
I can see some laughing and nodding of the heads from Gethin and Demetrius. Is there anything you guys want to add on any of that, or should we move on?
I would just add that I love the idea of not being contacted by a salesperson anymore and being able to silence an avatar much quicker.
For sure. Demetrius, we okay? We'll keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. But I agree with Gethin. Not getting 10 robocalls a day, that'll be nice.
For sure. All right, thanks very much. Thanks very much for that answer there, Frankie. Gethin, I'll come back to you, and I know that this next topic is a little bit closer to your heart, obviously with your psychology background, and I want to talk a little bit about well-being. So the question here is, how can organizations effectively manage the transition to an AI-centric workforce while ensuring employee well-being and job security?
So for me, this is a pretty critical question. It was the subject of a keynote talk I did to the British Safety Council annual conference yesterday. So it's something that, you know, those working in health and safety are really kind of attuned to at the moment. I advocate for the employee, and a lot of my work is about supporting employee well-being. But I'm also a big fan of tech and the potential I think AI has to make the workplace and the world better. But I think for many people listening today, I think this specific issue isn't about tech, it's about all of you. If we look at some of the most recent research coming out of the US over the last few months, we can see that AI generally seems to, will impact almost every job to the tune of enhancing productivity by about 20%. So it'll pick up about 20% of most people's roles, broadly speaking. If that happens, employers, I think, have one of two decisions to make. Do I realize that 20% increase in productivity and performance and get my people to work harder so that they produce another 20% more than they did previously? Or do I commit to that saving and enhancing the lives of the people that work for me and get the additional productivity gains that are coming from putting my well-being first? So fundamentally, could you use AI to make employee well-being better? Could AI be this unlikely savior to our declining mental health and poor well-being? And I think if you take one example of, if you take the 5-day working week, most people tend to work 5 days a week. An improvement of 20% productivity across the board could make the 4-day working week a reality for millions of people. You'd see no loss in quality or quantity of work produced, but the employee would get more time for them, more time to spend in their lives doing more of what they love and they enjoy, and with the people that they love and enjoy spending time with. And as a result, will achieve more than they did previously, because that's been demonstrated in almost every experiment into the 4-day working week so far. Now, this is just an example. I'm not necessarily advocating for the 4-day working week, but I think it shows how we can use AI to make work and life better for the people we employ, not just for commercial gain. And I think if a workplace is dominated by AI, and as we've said, those soft skills and those more human skills have become more valuable, I think that will require us to take better care of the people that do work for us, and most employers currently are doing. And so I think, employees at this point in time in most countries in the world are overworked, are burnt out, are underappreciated, or are unwell. And we will never get them to achieve the innovation, the creativity, the customer loyalty, or the sales that we need them to if we don't take better care of them. And AI might just become this kind of riding on a white horse to save employee well-being if we handle it in the right way. But I think that's where it's down to the decisions we make on how we use the technology, not the technology itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very, very interesting angle there, because I guess the common understanding and thought process in terms of how AI is impacting is focusing on how we're going to make more money, how we're going to improve processes. And it's like, it's when you think about how much power it can have in other facets of the workforce, it's certainly a lot of opportunity there. So it's very interesting.
And bear in mind, just to add to that, the evidence behind supporting employee well-being in the workplace is now so vast and compelling. We can say with some certainty that if you look after your people, the better care you take of them, the higher your shareholder returns, the higher your profit, the higher your sales, the higher your customer loyalty. So it does come with productivity gains. There's just a better route to success that isn't at the expense of the employees that work for us.
Yeah. I think these are very valid points. That this is not only about the work environment. This is how we transition work through life and back and forth, and how this is impacting our life in general, right? Because 4 days a week work, that's not something that we are accustomed. I mean, this was usually associated with a political affiliation in the past, and now it becomes probably more pragmatic approach than anything else, right? And I want to highlight this particular item in connection with the technology adoption in general, new technology adoption in general. I think companies that do follow and adopt the new technologies, they tend to report high earnings, and their employees are making more money on average as well, right? So I think if you connect this with the well-being, I think we might be set for a completely different work-life balance approach.
And like you said earlier on, Demetrius, is about, how do we get people to buy into this new technology? The problem with AI up until this point in time is nobody's trusted it, because everyone's seen the Terminator example of what AI might look like, that is going to come and kill us and take our lives. I think what people need to understand and demonstrate in their own businesses and their own lives is, what's the benefit to me? If I'm going to give you my data, if I'm going to give you more of my time and I'm going to use this tech, what's the payoff to me? And I think for lots of employees, quite frankly, if you're saying we're using this new technology because it's going to make us more money, that messaging is not going to land with a lot of people. But if you're able to say to somebody, look, I can take some of the most mundane tasks away from you, I can make your job easier, your emails can be answered, you don't have to spend as much time responding to Teams or writing emails or scheduling meetings. If I can take some of these mundane bits away from your jobs so you can do the things that are uniquely human, spending time with customers, getting to know them, all the bits that you like doing about your job, that boosts purpose and belonging in the workplace, which are two really big parts of well-being as well. So again, I do think there is a way that everybody involved in this relationship can benefit from the way they use AI, but we can't just pitch this for commercial gain, because I think you just will not get employees engaged in that. And I think, there was this great story of, I think a journalist was being shown around Henry Ford's factory years and years ago when he started showing robots making productions. And he said, look, we're not going to, if this carries on, we're not going to need staff. And the journalist said, well, who's going to buy your cars then? And I think we might get to that point where actually, if you start to take away the employees and start replacing them with machines and AI, then what happens to the consumers that's buying your products? I think it's something we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Very interesting. We better keep moving along because we've only got about 20 minutes left in our session today. A reminder for everyone: if you've got any questions for our panelists, feel free to drop them in our Q&A at any time. We will have some time at the end to go into that. We've touched on it a little bit, I guess, but probably from the reverse angle, where there's been the perception of risk rather than like maybe looking at it as an opportunity, as we make this example about AI being a vehicle of employee well-being. But there is obviously still risks associated with AI, and that is probably the number one factor with employees and even employers alike about adopting AI, because of the uncertainty about what's associated with it. So I'm going to ask this to a couple of you, but I'll go to you, Francesca, first. What do you believe are the biggest risks associated with AI, and maybe if they already exist, like what are some methods to mitigate these risks now so that AI adoption is a little bit more seamless for organizations?
Sure. So there are two categories for me. One's to do with data and the other one's to do with IP. So I sort of touched on this before in terms of, GDPR, data processing, any sensitive information shouldn't go into training a large language model. So that needs to be ring fenced, and potentially for companies to start looking at using synthetic data to train their models. The second thing is to do with intellectual property. So if you are a creative, or you are a brand, or you are a celebrity, you can monetize what you do by owning the IP and saying, I created this piece of art, or I own the IP of Disney, so I can, protect this brand. And that's really, really important, because in this space, especially with visual generative AI, anyone can create a Nike trainer and cross-pollinate that with a Tiffany brand. So these brands are now going to look at how can they protect their brands. Maybe they will go after the platforms like Midjourney. Maybe they'll go after the actual models themselves and say, why was my artwork used to train your model? But the cat's already out of the bag. It's too late. We're all using OpenAI. It's trained on half of the internet, lots of books, patents, all sorts of things. So it's like there's a lot of information and IP within there. So that's one side of things, kind of keeping track of your IP, protecting it in different domains, for example, in games in the metaverse. And the next part is, if you are creating something with generative AI, how can you then say that I own this? At the moment, you don't own the copyright, you can't monetize it. So even if you're Disney and you've used all of your digital assets to train an AI to create new Disney characters, you don't own the copyright. So that is forcing lawyers now to look. So lawyers and technologists need to work together to innovate and build out solutions. And one of the solutions that's been posed recently is a new form of IP, which is called generative IP, which looks at the output of generative AI, the training data, and the actual model at that point of conception. But this is really, really difficult stuff. Stability AI are looking at, building this into their technology. They're very, for the people, they're open source, they're ethical. I really love their values as a company. They're working with Adobe on this. But it's difficult. It's something that needs to be built on the architecture level, potentially with blockchain. Another company that are making waves in this space are called Metaphysic. So as we get into a world of deep fakes, we will probably all start scanning our faces to, see ourselves in 3D, just as we've got images online and we're giving that all away to Facebook Meta. They will have our 3D information as we grow old and our body changes and all that sort of thing. So how do you protect your name, image, and likeness? I was invited, for example, to speak at a conference in Barcelona, and they wanted to create an avatar of me, and then I had to sign a name, image, and likeness contract for perpetuity. And they're also going to train my avatar with my voice. So you need to be really, really careful about who you're giving your data away to. Every single platform, even Shutterstock, they're going to be competing with Midjourney that's creating just as good photos. So soon they're going to realize, actually, do you know what? We need to create our own generative AI, and we're going to do that by training it on all of the photos that have been uploaded in good faith. And we're just going to change the terms and conditions. So it's really up to consumers to read the terms and conditions, make sure that there's a sort of opt-out. Same thing with ChatGPT, you can opt out of any information that goes in there, training the LLM, and so on and so forth. So those are the two main risks. And then the third one is to do with cybersecurity threats. Someone, a fake bot calling as your daughter or your husband, saying they're kidnapped, and so those sorts of issues are definitely going to be on the rise. But I'm not an expert on cybersecurity.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, interesting and concerning, I think, is the best way to summarize some of your responses there. Demetrius, what about you in your perspective? What are some of the risks with AI, and what are some techniques to mitigate the risks?
Yeah, I think Frankie was splitting this in a proper way and addressing these things. I'll try to add something to that. And I think the first one, and we have to be honest about this, and job displacement is a real threat, right? And I think we need to admit this. And I think there's a lot of people probably on this webinar that are thinking, which part of my job will go away, and whether that whatever is left is going to be enough to keep me, right? So I think we need to address this and definitely hear the training, education, reskilling, upskilling, all these techniques that organizations can afford and probably should afford and use them or proudly should help with that. But I think at the individual level, we need to start investing in ourselves as well. I mean, somebody said that the best investment you can make, it's in yourself. And I think this is becoming a real real thing. Another one is something that is more on the social side. It's an increase in inequality. I think the AI could exacerbate existing inequalities. For those who have access to AI, that it's more efficient. And we've seen this with other technologies before, right? Like some of these technologies or features are simply gated and require additional funds. So we got to be careful with that. I think some of the AI functionality should be available to anyone. I like the phrase, it was coined within a lot of other industries. We need to democratize this. So making this more equal from the access perspective is something we probably need to work on. Another one is bias. I think that every AI is trained on a specific data set, and as the new technologies that we base on AI, we'll work on a specific data sets. We have to ensure that we have a proper comment and notes about that, but also we have a people that can check to what extent actually that bias exists. And here definitely something that around the ethical guides that governments and businesses will need to work off will help to fill that gap. And the last one is what Frankie elaborated pretty well about the safety and the complexity, right? It's difficult to predict how AI will behave in the real world in a lot of areas that actually today we haven't seen this yet, right? So we definitely have to think about how we're going to approach the safety risks, and such as accidents and malicious attacks. That definitely will happen. So regulation and approach from the kind of more legal coded perspective should help us, and also should help to provide some guarantee to the society that will use this almost in every aspect of the work, sometimes not even recognizing that that's the AI.
Yeah. Thanks very much for both of your responses, Frankie and Demetrius. We've got to keep moving along because we don't have much time left, and I can see a few questions in the Q&A already. So what I'm going to do is try and combine one of our last questions and one of the questions here in the Q&A. So I'll point this towards you, Gethin, here. Demetrius touched on this a little bit before about the role of continuous learning and upskilling play in a competitive to stay competitive in AI driven job market. We've also got a question in the Q&A here, which is what new roles are we predicting with AI dominated environments? So maybe if your response, you could think a little bit about the role of upskilling and continuous learning, and some of the roles that are going to become more predominant as we move forward.
Yeah, so I think as we've kind of covered, I think there's going to be jobs that we're able to predict at the moment that will become available. We're almost on parity if you look at some of that research about the jobs it's going to take away, but the ones that it's going to create. And there's also a big unknown here. There's obviously a whole load of jobs that are going to be created that at this point in time we can't predict. I mean, a review I read into 200 different studies into AI found that we're actually lacking a really clear picture of what kind of demands AI is going to be putting on our organizations. And so I think there's a lot of unknowns here. I think when you think about continuous learning and upskilling, I think if you first think about, we've touched on this a little bit already, but the pace of development in AI is really fast, incredibly fast in some cases. If you look at kind of one common and popular AI tool, ChatGPT, that's one that everyone's probably used. It's the one that's had a lot of media attention over the last 12 months. We can start to see how fast that's evolving and how quickly our people are going to need to keep up, and us as well as employers. When ChatGPT first emerged to the masses in, I think it was November 2022, it impressed lots of people. It was AI like we hadn't seen on that kind of consumer basis before. But by March 2023, when ChatGPT 4 was released, that was 5 times better than the previous version. That rate of improvement means that within a 1-year period, ChatGPT was improving by a very significant margin. And I think if you apply that rate of improvement to something that we're probably all familiar with on this call, you'll understand just how scary this pace of development is and how much more work we're going to have to do to try and keep up to the skills that will be required. So if you look at something like the battery life on your phone, if we applied ChatGPT's rate of improvement to the battery on your phone, within less than 24 months from this point in time, so today as we're sat here on October the 18th, 2023, in less than 24 months from this point in time, you would never have to charge the battery on your phone. It would last the entire life of your phone. They'd never have to charge it. There'd be no cables. You'd have no panic. That battery would last you forever, for the whole time you had the phone. And so I think it's important that much of the tech that we've talked about is expected to advance at that rapid pace. And we've seen this before. In 2011, between 2011 and 2016, the number of smartphone sales globally doubled. So in just 5 years, most of the world went from not owning a smartphone to owning a smartphone. That's fast. They became part of our lives really, really quickly. So I actually think, apart from some of the things we've talked about, there's not a huge amount people can do to upskill people at the moment, because we don't know how this tech is going to evolve and how quickly we're going to need skills. Like, who would have known that you might need somebody who would be able to help you navigate ChatGPT 12 months ago? Most people just didn't even know that was going to be coming. So back to our earlier kind of collective points, I think, you can focus on the skills that we are pretty sure are going to be important in the future, and some of those human skills I think are going to raise in importance. So I would say that focusing on those and making sure, as Demetrius said, that we don't displace people wherever possible, and upskill those, I think it's going to be a really, really important thing to do.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to jump into our last poll now, because we've still got questions rolling through now. And people in the audience, if you still have questions, please fire them. If we don't manage to get through all of them, we will be answering them, and we'll share them with you by email afterwards. But we'll do our best to get through everything that's in there. I'm going to launch our third and final poll, just as a bit of a summary of today's discussion before we get to our Q&A. That should be on your screen now. And the question is, how optimistic are you about the future impact and potential of AI? And reading these out because they don't come up in the recording. So very pessimistic, somewhat pessimistic, neutral, somewhat optimistic, very optimistic. And obviously we've covered the topic from a variety of angles. So hopefully this, if you weren't already feeling informed about AI, you have somewhat more of a better understanding of it now. Still only about half of you have voted, so do that now, and then I'll end the poll and share the results. Okay, I'll end the poll, share the results on the screen. So with 46%, we have somewhat optimistic, neutral with 27%, very optimistic with 19%, and then somewhat pessimistic for 8%. Interestingly, no one voted for very pessimistic, which is good to see. Glass half full kind of audience here today. So now I believe it would be a good time to get to our Q&A, and then we'll come back to our last question, panelists, before we do that. So I'm just going to do some quick fire responses for Q&A in here, and I'm just going to select you guys one at a time. So I might start with you, Francesca, and I'll start with this first question here, which is, how accurate are the results from AI-based tools and platforms? How much can we rely on it? Let's answer that one.
So they hallucinate a lot, but at the same time, they can be used to really speed up the process. So for example, you can use ChatGPT. There's ChatGPT 3, which is a simple version. And then there's ChatGPT 4, which is a little bit more nuanced. You can get it to read a document and summarize it. For example, you can get it to put information into a table format. And then there are plugins. So you can output things into a diagram format. You can put it into a CSV, which you can download. So I would say it's a really good tool for reformatting information. So, add the information that you want rather than relying it to give you the accurate results. Sometimes ChatGPT used to add fake references, and then you click on those links and the site doesn't exist. So learning how to fact check will be really, really important, just like if you're writing an academic paper. And so I think that would be one of the key skills, is like fact checking your work before it goes out.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to you, Demetrius, because we haven't had a response from you in a while. So got a question here from Dania. What do you think is the most important leadership role in AI adoption?
I think the leadership role starts with the CEO, and I think the CEOs of the organizations, they need to realize a couple of things. Number one, how commercially they can get better using the AI, and that's what I was talking about in answering one of your questions at the beginning. about what the early adopters were telling us, and I think that a lot of the CEOs started to realize that. The second role I would call out the most important is definitely a CTO or CIO, anyone who is really managing the whole architecture in the organization, right? And then the third one, which is equal to the second, is the HR person. HR, head of HR, to ensure that, you know, there is a process that allows the employees and organization to shift on multiple dimensions that we talked about, right? So these are the probably top three roles that I see are extremely important to follow. Yeah.
Cool. Three left, so we'll make our way through them. I think we've got enough time, so I'll bring this one to you, Gethin. This question here is about recruiters. So how can recruiters adapt themselves in an AI-driven future?
So some of the AI horror stories from like 10 years ago were related to recruitment. So we learned that Facebook, I think it was, had a AI recruitment tool that was biasly not employing women because its profile of what a good employee looked like was a white male. So it started to have some really kind of complex parts of that. And I think, as Demetrius mentioned earlier on, you know, if AI data's got human fingerprints on it, it's going to be biased. And so I think AI has a huge potential in recruitment. You know, if you have a job vacancy that's got thousands or hundreds of applicants, you know, it can start to search through that information for you, find relevant skills, relevant experience, all that kind of stuff really, really quickly. And so I think, yeah, I think it's got some really huge potentials for recruitment. I think adapting themselves to that is just like we've kind of worked out that if AI is going to do some of the heavy lifting from these roles, how do you make the most of the rest of your role? And I think there's certainly a role for recruiters to relieve themselves of a lot of that admin, which can actually get them to the bottom of really getting to understand the person. Do they fit the culture, all that kind of stuff, which I think AI at the moment is going to be quite difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And thanks for keeping these answers. It's really been successful. Yeah. Sometimes I say quick fire to when we do these webinars, and it's like we're 10 minutes on one question. So we're doing well so far. So 2 questions to go here in the Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up. This one's from Robert. I'll bring it to you, Frankie. So do you think there is a mass wave of reskilling and upskilling coming to the IT market? What tools could be used to help organizations define reskilling areas?
Yes, absolutely. And there are issues with, I think it's still important to understand, you know, the foundations of coding before you can sort of jump in and start to use ChatGPT to guide you through that learning process. But for example, a lot of people use YouTube to teach themselves, or they might, if they're early adopters, they might be using different tools like, say, Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, and they might be in the Discord channel, and that's where they'll find like-minded people who are trying to figure out how to use these tools, what are the use cases, and things like that. And so one of the things you can do in ChatGPT is you can feed it with YouTube videos, and what ChatGPT will do is it will read the transcript of the video and it can summarize that. So it means if you're trying to learn ChatGPT, you can find lots of YouTube videos on ChatGPT and then feed it into ChatGPT, and it'll give you a really good summary report, a lesson, whatever you're looking for.
Okay. I can see Gethin is going to answer this question live, but I was going to bring this to Demetrius, but either one of you can answer this one. So the last question here is from Patrick. What do you think about people analytics, AI applied to HR in order to have data-based decisions? And either you Gethin or Demetrius can take this last one.
Go ahead, Gethin.
So this is really compelling. This is the area I'm involved in most. I think it's going to have huge applications. We're already working on technology that's allowing people to understand things like sentiment analysis. So based on actions that employees complete, how they complete surveys, how they track their mood, how they react to getting a recognition in the workplace. We're already experimenting with AI data and that kind of data at the moment to be able to help employers to understand what's the level of engagement in your organization, what are the flight risks, can we kind of predict what things you might do to a person that would make them more likely to want to leave your organization. So really, really compelling area, and happy to talk more about that at a later date on that specific topic.
We could have a whole separate webinar on that one particularly, I think. But
I think so.
So I might then. I've got one last question here for you, Demetrius, which you can take for everyone. So, what's your outlook on the future of AI in the workplace, and what are some of the trends that you foresee coming in the near future?
Yeah, I think we discussed this, and I think there's a agreement on this call, this webinar, that increased automation is coming, right? That's almost inevitable. That is happening. It's been happening for some time. Now it's going to accelerate. So we got to get ready for that. I think the second one I would call out is the improved decentralized decision making, as these tools are impacting every single employee. And I think Gethin was referring to how this impacts in a tangible way every single employee in the organization. I think a lot of them will be able to make those decisions, not as it was top down before, or more or less top down before. They almost working by themselves and they're making the best decisions. I think we can expect to see the new products and services. I think AI will help us to create the new products that we haven't seen before, because we don't think necessarily that way. The next one is the significant investment in training and development, because of all the shifts that need to occur, and ensure that the company's investing in the tools of the future, tools and skills of the future, because the world will accelerate, right? So I think that is becoming more important and almost like a necessity, not an optionality, in my opinion. As a derivative of that, I think we're going to see a lot of shift in the culture that will accentuate more a learning part instead of just acquiring some random skills, right? And I think it will be more intrinsic than endemic in its nature. This culture will need to be more, I would say, adopted and ingrained into all of the aspects of reviews with the employees, time management, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're going to experience something that we haven't in the past. What will be the job for AI versus what will be the job for humans? There'll be jobs that we will call AI, and they'll do a certain work, and what the humans will need to do. And I think it will be a broader conversation about ethical use of AI. So that's a legitimate concern. And we're probably going to experience public debate, organizational debate, business, industry, how to handle all these various issues with the data sharing. So this is my prediction and outlook.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you've summed it up quite nicely there. We are a little bit over time. So we will wrap it up there. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to our panelists, so Demetrius, Gethin, and Francesca. Thanks very much for the insights shared today. I think it was a very valuable discussion, and thank you very much for everyone who joined us. Just a quick reminder, you will be receiving a link to the webinar recording tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out on your inbox. And probably in the next 30 minutes, you're going to receive an email with the survey I mentioned at the opening of the webinar, which we'd really appreciate your insights and feedback on that as well. So once again, thanks everybody for joining, and see you all next time. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, guys.